Naomi, the homeless genius. Tiantai Vogjiaku, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed listeners, today we invite you to step into a world where resilience battles prejudice and brilliance shines through the darkest shadows. Prepare to be captivated by The Homeless Genius, the extraordinary tale of Naomi, a woman stripped of everything but her unparalleled mathematical mind. Witness her improbable journey from the unforgiving streets to the hallowed halls of academia, where her talent becomes both her salvation and her greatest challenge. Will her genius be recognized, or will the weight of societal judgment crush her dreams? Tune in, hit that subscribe button, and embark on this inspiring story of intellect, struggle, and ultimate triumph. The rain, a relentless, icy curtain, had been Naomi's only companion for the past 3 days. It lashed against the grimy windows of the prestigious Evergreen University, the very edifice she now circled like a phantom, her silhouette swallowed by the downpour. Each gust of wind, a cruel, invisible hand, pushed against her threadbare coat, a garment that had long since surrendered its warmth. Her stomach, a cavern of forgotten meals, clenched in a familiar ache, but it was the gnawing hunger for purpose, not food, that truly haunted her. She clutched a crumpled, rain-soaked flyer, custodian positions available, a lifeline as flimsy as her own fading hope. Naomi, a woman whose skin held the richness of deep earth and whose eyes, despite their weariness, still held the spark of constellations, was far from the beggar most assumed her to be. Her gaunt frame was not merely a testament to hunger, but to a life lived on the fringes, a stark canvas painted with the relentless brushstrokes of hardship. Yet beneath the tattered exterior, a mind of prodigious depth hummed, a universe of numbers and equations waiting for its moment to bloom. These university gates, ornate ironwork gleaming wetly, seemed to mock her. A security guard, burly and impervious, eyed her with the detached suspicion usually reserved for stray dogs. His gaze, a cold, clinical assessment, slid over her damp hair, matted and escaping its precarious bun, past the patched knees of her trousers, and lingered on the battered sneakers that offered scant protection against the puddles. "Lost, ma'am?" he grunted, his voice laced with an unspoken dismissal. Naomi offered a weak smile, a gesture of politeness that felt like a foreign language on her chapped lips. "No, sir. I'm here about the job opening." A snort. The guard merely gestured vaguely towards a side entrance, clearly expecting her to disappear back into the urban anonymity from which she'd emerged. But Naomi, a creature of unyielding resolve, persisted. The very air of the campus, thick with the scent of old books and ambition, was an intoxicating elixir to her. It was a world she had once belonged to, a world snatched away by an unforeseen tragedy, a sudden brutal loss that had fractured her family and scattered her dreams like autumn leaves. She had been a mathematical prodigy then, her name whispered with awe in local academic circles. Now her brilliance was a secret, hidden beneath layers of dust and despair. She finally found the facility's office, a sterile, echoing space that smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. The woman behind the desk, her face a mask of polite indifference, barely looked up from her computer. "Application? Fill this out. Don't expect much. We've got a lot of applicants." The form, a labyrinth of personal details, felt like a cruel joke. Current address? Previous employment? Naomi's pen hovered, a featherweight against the weight of her past. She filled in vague, unhelpful answers, her pride a fragile shield against the truth of her homelessness. She secured the job, a night custodian, with a grudging shrug from the manager. "Start tonight. Don't touch anything you're not supposed to." The words, cold and sharp, cut deeper than the wind. That night, as the campus slept, bathed in the muted glow of security lights, Naomi moved through the silent halls like a shadow. Her mop swished, a rhythmic sigh against the polished floors. But her eyes, bright and insatiably curious, scanned every corner. Discarded lecture notes, overflowing from recycling bins, were meticulously retrieved. Forgotten textbooks, abandoned on library tables, were carefully examined. She absorbed every stray piece of knowledge, her mind a sponge eagerly soaking up the intellectual currents that flowed through these hallowed halls. One night, drawn by an irresistible pull, she found herself in the advanced calculus wing. The heavy oak doors creaked open, revealing a large lecture hall, bathed in the glow of a single, strategically placed emergency light. A vast whiteboard, still bearing the ghosts of complex equations from the day's lesson, beckoned to her. With trembling hands, she picked up a discarded marker. The chalk dust, a forgotten memory of a brighter past, coated her fingers. A problem, half-finished and seemingly intractable, covered a significant portion of the board. It was a notoriously difficult proof, one that had stumped even her in her academic prime. Naomi's breath hitched. A rush of adrenaline, pure and exhilarating, coursed through her veins. The world outside, with its cold rain and gnawing hunger, faded into oblivion. Only the problem existed. Her hand, guided by an unseen force, began to move across the whiteboard. The initial strokes were hesitant, then grew bolder, more confident. Lines of logic connected, variables danced, and numerical symmetries emerged. With stunning clarity, she worked with a feverish intensity, her mind racing ahead of her hand, solving the problem not just with textbook methods but with an intuitive elegance that was uniquely her own. The silence of the deserted hall amplified the soft squeak of the marker, a lone symphony of genius in the dead of night. Just as she meticulously penned the final elegant solution, a faint click echoed from the hallway. A door opened. Naomi froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. She wasn't alone. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at her skin. What if she was caught? What if this fragile, fleeting connection to the world of knowledge was ripped away from her? The brilliant solution on the whiteboard, her secret triumph, now felt like a glaring transgression. She had touched what she wasn't supposed to, consumed what wasn't offered. The promise of discovery had lured her into a perilous dance with exposure. The clicking sound had not been a figment of Naomi's raw nerves. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the hallway, coalescing into the lean, angular form of Professor Elias Thompson. His presence was an almost palpable force, a quiet intensity that filled the cavernous lecture hall. He was a man carved from intellect, his hair a wild silver mane, his eyes, usually sharp with intellectual rigor, now narrowed in an expression Naomi couldn't quite decipher. A sheaf of papers, bristling with equations, was clutched in his hand, as if even in the late hours his mind remained tethered to the infinite complexities of mathematics. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which had just soared with the triumph of solving the intricate problem, now plummeted, a stone thrown into a deep well. Shame, hot and consuming, flared within her. She felt like a thief, caught red-handed, not with a stolen object, but with stolen knowledge. The marker still clutched in her hand felt like a weapon. The brilliant solution on the whiteboard a neon sign screaming her transgression. Professor Thompson's gaze, initially sweeping over the pristine order of the hall, landed on the whiteboard, his brow furrowed, a thunderous expression beginning to gather. "What in the blazes?" he muttered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Are you defacing university property, young woman? Do you have any idea the cost of these boards, the delicate nature of these equations?" He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes, like twin lasers, zeroing in on the solution. The lecture hall, once a sanctuary of discovery, now felt like an interrogation room. Naomi instinctively took a step back, her hands clenching at her sides. The scent of stale chalk and her own rising fear filled the air. She braced herself for the inevitable tirade, for the dismissal, the humiliation that seemed to follow her like a perpetual shadow. Her mind raced, a frantic flurry of excuses, none of which felt adequate, but the tirade never came. Instead, a strange stillness settled over Professor Thompson. His face, which had been contorted in annoyance, slowly smoothed out, replaced by an expression of disbelief, then dawning awe. He moved closer to the whiteboard, his steps slow and deliberate, as if approaching a delicate artifact. He traced a finger along the elegant curves of Naomi's solution, his eyes devouring every symbol, every calculation. The problem, a notoriously difficult proof from the realm of non-Euclidean geometry, was one he had assigned to his most advanced graduate students. Few had even come close to a complete solution, and none with such unfathomable elegance. This is impossible," he whispered, not to Naomi, but to himself. A low, reverent hum. His gaze, usually so impenetrable, now held a flicker of something akin to wonder, a rare light in his often stoic demeanor. He turned to Naomi, his eyes, still, filled with a disbelieving curiosity locking onto hers. "Who are you?" Naomi swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Naomi," she managed, her voice a reedy whisper. I'm the new custodian." The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the intellectual prowess she had just displayed. The truth of her current existence clashed violently with the unspoken promise of her potential, creating a tension as palpable as the silence between them. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Professor Thompson's face, a mix of surprise, perhaps even a hint of shame for his initial judgment. He was a man who prided himself on logic, yet here was an anomaly that defied all his preconceived notions. A custodian, a woman barely visible in the academic landscape, had just solved a problem that challenged the brightest minds in his department. His eyes, now sharper than ever, bore into hers, dissecting, analyzing. It was an uncomfortable scrutiny, but beneath it Naomi sensed not contempt, but a profound, almost desperate curiosity. "This solution," he began, his voice still low, "it's unique. You didn't just solve it. You found a path I haven't seen before, a shortcut through a labyrinth." He picked up another marker, his gaze still fixed on her. "Prove it." Naomi blinked. "Prove what, sir?" "Prove you didn't just copy this from somewhere," he challenged, his voice regaining some of its earlier edge, a touchstone of his academic rigor. "Or that you didn't simply stumble upon it. Show me your method. Show me your mind." He then scribbled a new, even more complex problem on a clean section of the whiteboard. It was a differential equation, woven with elements of chaos theory, designed to break even the most tenacious intellects. The strokes were swift, decisive, almost aggressive. It was a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge designed to separate the truly gifted from the merely clever. A wave of fear washed over Naomi, quickly followed by a surge of something she hadn't felt in years. Exhilaration. This wasn't about cleaning floors anymore. This was about knowledge. This was about a conversation, a challenge, a connection with a mind that could truly understand. The hunger she felt now was for intellectual engagement, a craving more intense than any physical need. Her tattered clothes, her aching feet, the cold dampness that clung to her, all faded into the background. She grabbed another marker, her hand steady, no longer trembling. As she began to work, a quiet focus settled over her. The problem on the board seemed to unravel before her eyes, its intricate threads becoming clear, almost luminous. Numbers danced, symbols flowed, and the elegant architecture of the solution began to emerge. Professor Thompson watched, his arms crossed, his expression a fascinating blend of skepticism and growing astonishment. His initial suspicion slowly began to dissolve, replaced by a profound respect. Naomi moved with a fluid grace, her movements economical and precise. She filled the board with equations, her explanations concise and brilliant, her methods defying conventional approaches. She spoke softly, almost to herself, explaining the logic, the rationale behind each step. It wasn't just solving a problem. It was an act of creation, a mathematical ballet performed in the dead of night. When she finally laid down the marker, the entire whiteboard was a testament to her genius. The second problem, equally as challenging as the first, lay conquered, its secrets laid bare. A profound silence hung in the air. broken only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. Professor Thompson simply stared, his mouth slightly agape. His usual academic composure had completely vanished, replaced by an almost childlike wonder. "Incredible," he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "Simply incredible." He walked over to her, his movements hesitant, as if approaching a rare, fragile specimen. "You, Naomi, are a phenomenon, a genuine, unadulterated talent." His words, genuine and heartfelt, were a balm to Naomi's long-starved soul. Tears, unbidden, pricked at her eyes. She hadn't heard such praise in years, not since her world had crumbled. It felt like being seen, truly seen for the first time in an eternity. A new emotion, one she hadn't dared to entertain in years, began to bloom within her. Hope. Fragile, yet undeniable. It was a tiny seedling, pushing through the concrete of her despair. "You need to be in a classroom, Naomi," Professor Thompson declared, his voice firm, resolute. "Not scrubbing floors. This is a waste. A criminal waste." His declaration, however well-intentioned, carried the weight of a monumental challenge. Naomi, despite the flicker of hope, was acutely aware of the chasm between her current reality and the lofty world of academia. The thought of being a student again, surrounded by privilege and expectation, felt overwhelming. I can't, sir," Naomi stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "I have nothing. No home, no money. I barely have enough to eat." The raw truth of her circumstances, often hidden, was now laid bare. The stark contrast between her intellectual brilliance and her material poverty hung heavy in the air. Professor Thompson looked at her, his gaze softening. He saw not just a genius, but a human being burdened by a cruel fate. A memory flickered. In his mind, a fleeting image of his own youth, of a time when he too had struggled against the odds to pursue his passion for mathematics. It was a whisper of empathy, a rare resonance in the often isolated world of academia. "We will find a way, Naomi," he said, his voice imbued with a quiet power. "I will find a way. You belong here. Your mind belongs here." His words were not a promise, but a vow. He saw in Naomi not just a student, but a chance for redemption, a chance to prove that true genius could transcend the rigid boundaries of social stratification. His declaration, however, was not without its immediate repercussions. The very next morning, the news of Professor Thompson's discovery spread like wildfire through the faculty lounge. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into outright protests. "A custodian? Are you serious, Elias? This is unprecedented. What about the standards of this institution?" Among the most vocal critics was Michael, a brilliant, albeit arrogant, graduate student in Professor Thompson's own department. Michael, with his perfectly coiffed hair and a smirk that seemed permanently etched on his face, considered himself the undisputed heir to Professor Thompson's intellectual legacy. He was the golden boy, the one destined for academic stardom. The mere idea of a homeless woman, a custodian no less, challenging his intellectual supremacy was an affront to his meticulously constructed world. "Professor Thompson," Michael stated, his voice dripping with condescension as he cornered the professor by his office door. "With all due respect, this is preposterous. Are we truly to believe that a cleaner possesses the intellect to solve problems that stump your own graduate students? It's an insult to everything this university stands for." His words, sharp as daggers, were meant to cut, to dismiss, to reinforce the invisible but powerful social hierarchy. Professor Thompson simply looked at him, his gaze unwavering. "Talent, Michael, does not discriminate based on one's postcode or pedigree. It simply exists. And when I find it, I nurture it." He held Michael's gaze, a silent challenge passing between them. The stage was set. Naomi, a diamond in the rough, was about to enter a world that would either polish her to a blinding brilliance or crush her under its immense weight. The promise of knowledge, so tantalizingly close, was also shadowed by the formidable walls of prejudice and envy that had already begun to rise around her. Professor Thompson's conviction was her only shield, a beacon against the storm that was surely gathering. The quiet hum of the university at night, once a sanctuary for Naomi's secret intellectual pursuits, was about to be shattered by the cacophony of conflict and competition. Her journey, once a solitary struggle for survival, was now an unwitting battle for recognition, for dignity, and for the very soul of her shattered dreams. Naomi's new life at Evergreen University began not with a triumphant flourish, but with the quiet, persistent grind of a stone being honed. Professor Thompson, true to his word, had moved mountains. He'd navigated the labyrinthine bureaucracy of the university, leveraging his considerable influence and the sheer audacity of Naomi's talent to secure a scholarship. It was a partial scholarship, covering tuition but leaving the crucial aspects of daily life: housing, food, books, a gaping, anxious void. This was the first and most immediate hurdle in her precarious ascent. She was given a small Spartan room in the oldest dorm building, far from the bustling, well-appointed student residences. It was a space designed for temporary stays, not for forging a new life. The single window looked out onto a brick wall, a stark metaphor for the barriers still surrounding her. Yet, to Naomi, it was a palace, a door that locked, a bed that was truly hers, and a desk, a sacred altar for her newfound studies, were luxuries beyond compare. The air in the room, though slightly stale, was filled with the faint scent of old wood and the promise of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. The transition from the cold, indifferent streets to the hallowed halls of academia was a jarring one. Naomi, accustomed to anonymity, was now under a microscopic lens. Whispers followed her like a phantom limb. "That's the custodian girl," they'd murmur, their voices a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Her clothes, though cleaner, still bore the silent testament of her past. Her hair, though neatly brushed, lacked the practiced sheen of her affluent peers. She was a dark, unfathomable star dropped into a galaxy of polished, predictable luminaries. Her classes were a mixed bag of awe and torment. In Professor Thompson's advanced mathematics seminars, Naomi was a celestial body in orbit, her mind effortlessly grasping concepts that left even seasoned students reeling. She thrived in the abstract purity of numbers, the elegant logic of proofs. Her insights, often presented with a quiet humility, frequently prompted Professor Thompson to nod with a rare, approving smile, a gesture of respect that was lost on many but cherished by Naomi. She often saw him watching her, a contemplative expression on his face, as if he were seeing the potential of a universe unfolding before him. But outside the sanctuary of mathematics, the university was a different beast. In lectures where social interaction was key, or in casual conversations in the bustling student common areas, Naomi felt like an alien. The casual banter, the shared histories, the subtle cues of social engagement were a language she had forgotten, or perhaps never fully learned. She found herself retreating into the familiar comfort of silence, her eyes constantly scanning for an escape route, a quiet corner where she could be invisible. The most persistent thorn in her side was Michael. His presence was like a discordant note in a symphony, jarring and unpleasant. He was relentless, a predator circling his perceived prey. During class discussions, he would direct pointed, condescending questions at her, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. Perhaps Naomi, with her unique perspective, can enlighten us on this trivial matter, he'd say, a smirk playing on his lips, designed to elicit snickers from his clique. He challenged her at every turn, not out of intellectual curiosity, but out of a desperate need to assert his own superiority. One particularly grueling afternoon, during a complex problem-solving session, Michael presented a solution he clearly thought was flawless. Naomi, her mind working furiously, spotted a subtle flaw, a crucial oversight that would invalidate the entire proof. Her heart pounded. Should she speak up? The vulnerability of her position, the immense pressure to conform, to be accepted, almost silenced her, but the mathematical truth, pure and uncompromising, screamed louder than her fear. "Professor Thompson," she began, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the murmuring classroom, I believe there might be a slight inaccuracy in Michael's approach to the boundary conditions. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Michael's face, usually composed, twisted in a mask of fury. Inaccuracy? What are you talking about? Naomi, this is a standard proof. Naomi calmly walked to the whiteboard, her every step a defiance of gravity. With a discarded marker, she meticulously outlined Michael's error, then, with quiet precision, presented an alternative approach that perfectly resolved the problem. It was an elegant, undeniable correction. The classroom fell silent, save for the scratching of pens as students furiously copied down her solution. Professor Thompson, observing the scene, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes, simply nodded. Indeed, Naomi, an excellent observation. Michael, your solution, while commendable in its ambition, did overlook a crucial detail. Naomi's method demonstrates a deeper understanding of the underlying principles. His words, measured and authoritative, were a public endorsement, a small victory for Naomi, and a bitter pill for Michael. Michael's eyes, usually cold, now burned with a hot, consuming hatred. The incident, while proving Naomi's intellect, also deepened the chasm of animosity between them, a chasm that pulsed with unspoken threats. Beyond the academic challenges, Naomi grappled daily with the brutal realities of her financial situation. Even with the scholarship, there was never enough. She ate the cheapest food, often skipping meals. Her clothes grew even more worn. The constant gnawing worry about money was a heavy cloak, smothering the joy she found in learning. She picked up odd jobs whenever she could, cleaning offices, after hours, tutoring younger students, anything to earn a few extra dollars, to maintain the fragile illusion of stability. But even in this desolate landscape, small shoots of kindness began to emerge. A young woman named Lena, a bright-eyed physics major with an infectious laugh, often found Naomi hunched over textbooks in the library. Lena, initially curious about the mystery student Professor Thompson had taken under his wing, soon saw, past the worn exterior to the brilliant mind and gentle soul within. She started leaving Naomi small, discreet gifts: a leftover sandwich, a new pen, a neatly folded $20 bill tucked into a textbook. These acts of silent compassion were like unexpected warmth on a freezing night, slowly thawing the ice around Naomi's heart. "You work too hard, Naomi," Lena would say, her voice soft, devoid of judgment. "You need to eat." Naomi, touched by the unexpected kindness, would offer a hesitant smile. "Thank you, Lena. You don't have to." "Of course I do," Lena would counter, her eyes twinkling. "We're all in this together, aren't we? Besides, who else is going to keep Professor Thompson from driving us all insane with his quantum physics?" Another unexpected ally emerged in David, a quiet computer science student who often frequented the same late-night study spaces. David, often lost in the intricate world of algorithms, noticed Naomi's unwavering focus, her almost superhuman ability to grasp complex concepts. He saw her not as a custodian or a charity case, but as a fellow intellectual, a kindred spirit. He began to share his notes, offer insights, and slowly a tentative friendship blossomed, built on a shared passion for knowledge. He once helped her troubleshoot a particularly stubborn coding problem, and she, in turn, helped him simplify a complex mathematical model for his project. Their collaboration was a silent testament to the universality of intellect, a bridge built over the chasms of social expectation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tide began to turn. Naomi's consistent brilliance in class, her quiet strength, and her unwavering dedication started to erode the wall of prejudice. Some students, initially hostile or dismissive, began to approach her with questions, seeking her unique insights. Her solutions were too elegant to ignore, her understanding too profound to dismiss. She didn't seek their approval, but her sheer brilliance demanded their attention. The whispers didn't cease entirely, but their tone shifted. From derision they morphed into grudging respect, then, for a brave few, into genuine admiration. One evening, as Naomi walked across campus, the air crisp with the scent of autumn. She saw a group of students huddled near a bulletin board. As she passed, she overheard snatches of their conversation. "Did you see Naomi's solution for that topology problem? It was insane." "Yeah." Michael looked like he was going to explode. A faint smile, one that reached her eyes, touched Naomi's lips. It was a small, almost imperceptible shift, but it was there. She was no longer just the custodian girl. She was Naomi, the one who solved the impossible problems. Despite these small victories, the path ahead remained fraught with peril. The financial strain was a constant, dull ache. Michael's animosity, though temporarily overshadowed by her successes, festered like a hidden wound, waiting for its moment to strike. The university, a beacon of knowledge, still harbored its own shadows, its own unspoken biases. Naomi had proven her intellectual might, but the battles for true acceptance, for a place she could truly call her own, had only just begun. The Olympic mathematics competition loomed on the horizon, a distant, glittering prize, but also a formidable obstacle course that would test not only her mind, but the very depths of her resilience. The quiet hum of the university at night had changed, no longer just a sanctuary, but a battleground where whispers of brilliance clashed with roars of prejudice. The air on campus, usually thick with the buzzing energy of academic pursuit, had begun to hum with a different frequency, that of anticipation. The International Mathematics Olympiad loomed, a distant, shimmering Everest in the academic landscape, and the selection process for Evergreen University's team was underway. For weeks, the university's brightest mathematical minds had battled it out in rigorous internal competitions, their intellectual sparring matches echoing through the halls. Naomi, buoyed by the quiet support of Professor Thompson, Lena, and David, had approached each challenge with a calm, almost serene focus. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument, navigated complex problems with an effortless grace that often left her competitors bewildered. She wasn't driven by ego or the desire for external validation. Her motivation was a purer, more intrinsic love for the abstract beauty of mathematics itself. Each solved problem was a small, personal victory, a step further away from the shadows of her past. The final announcement was made during a tense, heavily attended assembly in the university's grand auditorium. Professor Thompson, standing beside the Dean of Sciences, read the names of the selected students. The first two were expected, brilliant minds from the senior class. Then, his voice, clear and resonant, pronounced the third name: Naomi Jenkins. A ripple, almost imperceptible at first, spread through the auditorium. Then, it swelled into a collective murmur, a mix of astonishment and muttered dissent. Naomi sat in the back row, her heart thrumming a quiet, almost disbelieving rhythm. She had done it. She, the former custodian, the homeless woman, had earned a place on the prestigious Olympiad team. A wave of profound gratitude washed over her, an invisible embrace from the universe. Her eyes instinctively sought out Professor Thompson, whose gaze met hers across the sea of faces, a silent acknowledgment of their shared triumph. But for Michael, Naomi's victory was a declaration of war. His face, usually a canvas of cultivated composure, contorted in a mask of incandescent rage. His jaw clenched, muscles bulging, as if he were physically restraining an outburst. He had been so certain of his own inclusion, so convinced that his pedigree, his meticulously crafted reputation, would secure his spot. He saw Naomi's selection not as merit, but as a deliberate insult, a public humiliation orchestrated by Professor Thompson. He felt as though the very air had been sucked from his lungs, leaving him gasping in a vacuum of envy and resentment. His initial seething anger quickly curdled into something far more dangerous, a cold, calculating desire for vengeance. He couldn't just let this stand. Naomi had not only bested him intellectually, but she had exposed the fragility of his self-worth, the hollowness beneath his polished facade. The wound to his pride was too deep, too festering to ignore. Michael sought out a dark ally, a figure who moved in the shadows of the university's administration, Dr. Alistair Finch. Finch was a former head of the mathematics department, a man of considerable influence who harbored a long-standing bitter rivalry with Professor Thompson. Finch believed Thompson's progressive, unorthodox teaching methods undermined the university's traditional values. More critically, Finch held a deep-seated, though often subtly masked, prejudice against anyone who didn't fit the mold of the privileged elite. Naomi, with her background and skin color, was the antithesis of everything Finch represented. Michael approached Finch in the hallowed quiet of the faculty club, the scent of aged wood and expensive whiskey hanging in the air. "Dr. Finch," Michael began, his voice low, carefully modulated. "I believe Professor Thompson's recent decision regarding the Olympiad team is highly questionable. It compromises the integrity of the university." Finch, a thin, sharp-featured man with eyes like shards of ice, simply raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "Indeed, Michael. Do elaborate." Michael, emboldened by the implied complicity, laid out his poisonous proposal. Naomi Jenkins. A brilliant mind, perhaps, but her background, it raises questions of opportunism. What if her genius isn't as organic as it seems? What if it's borrowed? He floated the idea of plagiarism, of cheating, of stolen ideas. He suggested that Naomi had somehow gained illicit access to past Olympiad problems or had appropriated unpublished research. The seeds of suspicion, once planted, began to sprout in Finch's fertile, prejudiced mind. Finch listened, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He saw not just an opportunity to undermine Thompson, but a chance to reassert the natural order he believed in. "Interesting, Michael. Very interesting. One must always protect the integrity of academia, mustn't one?" He made a subtle gesture, a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Leave it with me." The trap was set. Michael, with Finch's insidious guidance, began to weave a tangled web of fabricated evidence. They meticulously doctored emails, forged digital timestamps, and even created a spurious paper trail suggesting a connection between Naomi and a highly confidential archive of old exam questions. They planted evidence that mirrored obscure mathematical concepts from long-forgotten, unpublished dissertations, suggesting Naomi had plagiarized them. The plot was cunning, designed to appear as an unfortunate but undeniable pattern of misconduct. The first blow came subtly, a quiet summons to Professor Thompson's office. Naomi walked in, her heart light from her recent triumph, only to find Professor Thompson's face etched with a grave concern she'd never seen before. He held a thick file, its contents a mystery. "Naomi," he began, his voice strained, "there have been accusations." Her world tilted. The word accusations felt like a physical blow. Her mind, usually so clear, swam with a sudden dread. Then came the formal letter from the university's disciplinary committee. It was cold, sterile, and damning. "Allegations of academic misconduct," it read in stark formal language. It detailed the fabricated evidence, suspiciously high scores on obscure past problems, uncanny resemblances to unpublished research, and even an alleged unauthorized access log to the university's secure exam database. Each accusation was a shard of ice piercing her newfound hope. The news spread like wildfire, far faster than her good deeds ever had. The whispers returned, louder, more venomous than before. The subtle respect she had painstakingly earned evaporated overnight, replaced by suspicion and outright hostility. "I knew it," some would say, their voices filled with self-satisfied righteousness. Too good to be true, even some of the students who had begun to admire her, caught in the undertow of doubt, started to distance themselves. Lena's warm smile became hesitant, David's usually unwavering gaze averted. The isolation that had been her constant companion for years returned with a vengeance, a suffocating blanket of despair. Naomi felt like a ship caught in a sudden, violent storm. The academic world, which had briefly offered her sanctuary, was now turning against her. its currents dragging her back towards the abyss of her past. She tried to explain, to reason, to defend herself, but her words felt hollow, lost in the echoing chambers of accusation. The formal investigation began, a slow, merciless grinding of bureaucratic gears. She was forbidden from attending classes, her scholarship put on hold, her access to the university library revoked. The Olympiad dream, so vibrantly alive just days before, now felt like a cruel, vanishing mirage. Professor Thompson, her staunchest defender, fought fiercely on her behalf. He stormed into the dean's office, his voice booming with indignation. "This is a witch hunt, a blatant smear campaign fueled by prejudice." But even his influence seemed to wane against the orchestrated precision of the accusations. Finch, a shadowy figure, subtly pulled strings, ensuring the process was as difficult and isolating for Naomi as possible. Sitting alone in her Spartan dorm room, the brick wall outside her window a reflection of her despair, Naomi stared at the suspension letter. The ink seemed to bleed into the words, each character a painful accusation. The silence of the room was no longer a comfort, but a deafening roar of isolation. She had escaped the physical poverty of the streets, only to be trapped in a new, more insidious kind of destitution, the poverty of trust, of reputation, of hope. The ghosts of her past, the trauma of losing everything, began to stir, threatening to engulf her entirely. The dream of the Olympiad, once a brilliant beacon, was now a distant mocking spark, fading into the encroaching darkness. Her hard-won place on the team, the symbol of her triumph, was on the verge of being stolen, not by a superior intellect, but by the venomous machinations of envy and prejudice. The academic purity she so cherished was now tainted by a betrayal, far more intricate and cruel than any complex equation. The suspension letter felt like a death knell, echoing the finality of her previous life on the streets. Naomi's small dorm room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The brick wall outside her window seemed to press in, mirroring the insurmountable barriers that had suddenly risen before her. The academic world, which had briefly embraced her, now cast her out, its collective gaze as cold and unforgiving as the winter winds. She felt a profound despair, a chilling sense of déjà vu. This was her life's cruel refrain. Just when a door opened, a more formidable wall would rise. The dreams of the Olympiad, once a vibrant tapestry, unraveled thread by painstaking thread. Yet, even in the deepest recesses of her despair, a stubborn ember of resilience flickered. It was the same fire that had kept her alive on the streets, that had driven her to seek knowledge in forgotten corners. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Professor Thompson was a force of nature unleashed. His fury, usually confined to intellectual debates, now roared through the university's administrative corridors. He saw the flimsy, fabricated evidence for what it was, a thinly veiled attack born of prejudice and envy. His reputation, built over decades of unwavering integrity, became Naomi's shield. He tirelessly pieced together the fragments of truth, his mind, accustomed to unraveling complex mathematical proofs, now dedicated to dismantling a human conspiracy. He visited Naomi daily, not with pity, but with a fierce, unwavering belief. "This is a test, Naomi," he'd say, his voice firm. "Not of your mind, but of your spirit. Do not let them extinguish your light." Lena and David, though shaken by the swirling accusations, refused to abandon Naomi. Lena, with her sharp wit and burgeoning understanding of data analytics, became Naomi's unexpected investigator. She scoured the university's digital logs, cross-referencing timestamps, analyzing email metadata. "They're good, Naomi," she admitted, her face pale from sleepless nights, "but they're not flawless. There are inconsistencies." David, with his quiet, methodical brilliance in computer science, found the subtle digital fingerprints left by Michael and Finch's tampering. He unearthed deleted files, traced IP addresses, and reconstructed the timeline of their insidious plot. Their loyalty was a testament to the fact that genuine connection, unlike fleeting admiration, could withstand the most ferocious storms. The internal investigation, initially biased and swift, began to slow. Professor Thompson's relentless pressure, coupled with the increasingly undeniable digital evidence uncovered by Lena and David, forced the committee to take a closer, more unbiased look. The meticulously crafted facade of Michael and Finch's conspiracy began to crack, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The turning point came during a tense, closed-door hearing. Naomi, pale but resolute, sat opposite the disciplinary committee, her fate hanging in the balance. Michael, radiating smug confidence, presented his evidence, his narrative chillingly plausible. Then Professor Thompson rose. He systematically dismantled Michael's claims, each point meticulously countered with Lena and David's findings. He projected graphs of IP addresses, displayed timelines of doctored emails, and presented the irrefutable proof that Michael had gained unauthorized access to the university's secure servers, not Naomi. He even revealed a communication between Michael and Dr. Finch, casually discussing methods to ensure certain undesirables don't sully the university's reputation. But silence in the room was deafening. Michael's face, once triumphant, drained of all color, collapsing into a mask of pure terror. Dr. Finch, who had always maintained a detached, almost invisible presence, now shifted uncomfortably, his carefully constructed edifice of respectability crumbling before his eyes. The revelation of Finch's involvement sent shockwaves through the university. His long-standing rivalry with Professor Thompson, once dismissed as academic friction, now revealed its darker, more prejudiced undercurrents. The committee, faced with irrefutable evidence, had no choice. Naomi was fully exonerated. Her name, once dragged through the mud, was now cleared, shining brighter than before. Michael was immediately expelled, his academic career, built on a foundation of ego and deceit, shattered. Dr. Finch, facing public humiliation and professional ruin, was forced into early retirement, his legacy forever stained by his insidious machinations. Justice, though slow and painful, had prevailed. Naomi's return to campus was different this time. The whispers had vanished, replaced by open admiration. Students who had once shunned her now offered shy smiles and words of support. The university, in an unprecedented move, offered her a full scholarship, housing, and a stipend, a tangible acknowledgement of their colossal error and her extraordinary talent. It was a formal apology, a belated but meaningful embrace from the institution that had almost broken her. The International Mathematics Olympiad arrived, a whirlwind of intellectual intensity. Naomi, standing on the grand stage, felt a kaleidoscope of emotions. The scars of her past, the recent betrayal. They were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was stronger, more resilient, her spirit tempered in the crucible of adversity. She carried the weight of her journey, the hopes of her friends, and the quiet pride of Professor Thompson, whose gaze from the audience was a steady anchor in the storm of competition. The problems presented were a magnificent challenge, intricate tapestries of logic and intuition. Naomi worked with a quiet intensity, her pen dancing across the paper, each stroke a testament to her honed intellect. She saw the beauty in the numbers, the elegance in the proofs, and for a few hours the world outside her mathematical universe ceased to exist. When the results were announced, the name Naomi Jenkins rang out across the vast hall, followed by the words, "Gold Medalist." A roar erupted, a genuine heartfelt wave of applause that crashed over her. She walked onto the stage, her stride confident, her head held high. The flash of cameras, the blinding lights, the sea of faces, it was overwhelming yet exhilarating. She held the gleaming medal, a tangible symbol of her triumph, not just over complex equations, but over the relentless forces of poverty, prejudice, and betrayal. As she stood there, a tear trickled down her cheek, not of sadness, but of profound joy and gratitude. She was no longer the homeless woman, the outcast, the custodian girl. She was Naomi, the mathematical genius, a living testament to the indomitable power of the human spirit. Professor Thompson, his eyes shining with a rare tenderness, approached her, a proud smile gracing his lips. "You did it, Naomi," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You truly did it." Her journey was a powerful ode to resilience, a melody of hope composed in the face of despair. She had not only found her place in the world of numbers, but had forged her own unique equation for a life of purpose and dignity. The university, once a symbol of exclusion, was now her home, and her story, a beacon of inspiration, would illuminate the paths of countless others who dared to dream beyond the limitations of their circumstances. Naomi Jenkins, the girl who once sought warmth in the shadows, now radiated a light that could guide an entire constellation. Reflection and takeaways. The Homeless Genius is more than just a story of academic triumph. It's a profound exploration of resilience, the corrosive nature of prejudice, and the transformative power of belief. Naomi's journey reminds us that true genius knows no boundaries of wealth, race, or social status. Her story is a testament to the quiet strength found in perseverance and the unwavering hope that can bloom even in the harshest environments. It teaches us the vital lesson that we should look beyond superficial appearances and ingrained biases, recognizing the inherent worth and potential in every individual. The unwavering support of Professor Thompson, Lena, and David highlights the importance of empathy and the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it's unpopular. Ultimately, Naomi's gold medal is not just a symbol of mathematical prowess, but a shining beacon of victory against adversity, urging us all to nurture talent wherever it may be found, and to dismantle the walls of prejudice, one brick at a time.